I recently watched a video of a homecoming. Not the kind that goes viral for being heartwarming, but one that felt painfully raw. It started with a man, a veteran, sitting at his kitchen table. His family was all there, beaming, serving up his favorite meal. You could see they were desperate to get the old him back. One relative, trying to be supportive, leaned in and asked, "So tell us, what was the hardest part? What was it really like over there?" In an instant, the warmth vanished. The man didn't cry, he didn't shut down, he exploded. He slammed his glass onto the table, his face contorting into a mask of pure, white-hot rage. He started shouting about how they had no right to ask, calling them tourists in his life. The room went silent, that heavy, suffocating kind of silence where everyone is suddenly terrified of the person they're supposed to love. Later, I saw a comment on that video from someone claiming to be a neighbor. They didn't offer sympathy, they just said, "He needs to stop dwelling on the past and move on." It was a classic Jobsworth response, as if living with a shattered psyche is a choice someone makes for the drama of it. That instantaneous shift from the expectation of a shaking, quiet victim to this aggressive, volatile presence is the part of trauma we rarely talk about. We become better at recognizing the shaking veteran or the hunted look, but we struggle with the deeply rooted weed of anger. It's a toxic, stagnant relationship, much like a bickering couple that can't live with or without each other. When your brain is stuck in a permanent state of fight or flight, how are you supposed to flee when the enemy is your own thought process? Why is it that the people most hurt by the past are often the ones we find the hardest to stay in the room with? Today, we're looking at the hidden side of PTSD, where fear stops looking like a tragedy and starts looking like rage.
Wow. But that silence you described,
Yeah.
that terrified silence in the kitchen, I think that's exactly the frequency we need to tune into today. Because that neighbor's comment, just move on. I mean, it just gets under my skin.
It's so dismissive, isn't it? It feels like they're just saying, "Oh, stop being so dramatic."
It's worse than dismissive.
Yeah.
It's just wrong. It's scientifically illiterate. It shows this massive misunderstanding of what trauma actually is. We treat it like a software glitch, you know?
Right, like something you can just fix with a positive attitude.
Exactly. Patch it with a good vacation. But the research we're going to dive into today, from evolutionary psychology, from physiology, it tells a completely different story.
So what's the mission then? If we're not just here to say trauma is bad, which I think we all know,
Right.
what are we digging for?
The mission is to strip away the judgment, to get under the hood and look at the actual mechanics.
Yeah.
We're going to make the case today that the rage, that glass slamming explosion you described,
Yeah.
it isn't a malfunction.
It's not.
No. It's a logical, biological solution to a problem that, just doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, logical is a strong word. I mean, screaming at your family over dinner, that feels like the very definition of irrational.
In a modern kitchen, yes, absolutely, it's irrational. But your brain wasn't built for a modern kitchen. It was built for the savannah. We're going to explore why your body might actually prioritize being angry over being happy, and why sometimes burning bridges is, well, a survival strategy.
I want to test this logic theory right away, because our gut reaction is to see that rage as the machine breaking down. But you're telling me the machine is actually working too well.
It's working perfectly. It's just running in the wrong century.
Okay. To really get into this, I want to start with a case study from the material we looked at. This story, it really stuck with me because it's so mundane until it isn't.
Right. Elias isn't in a war zone anymore. He's not in a combat situation.
Elias is a former rescue worker. He spent years, pulling people out of collapsed buildings. He was dealing with unstable structures, with fire, with all the things that can go wrong.
So his entire professional life was about interpreting threats.
Exactly. His brain was meticulously trained to respect sound.
Because in his old job, sound wasn't just noise, it was data. The creak of a steel beam, the hiss of a gas line. That's life or death information.
100%. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Elias is in a supermarket.
Yeah.
And just take a second to think about a modern supermarket. It's an absolute assault on the senses.
Totally. The fluorescent lights, the shiny floors, thousands of brightly colored labels all screaming for your attention.
These crowded people are moving around in these unpredictable patterns. Carts are rattling. For you or me, we filter all that out. We're just there to find the pasta sauce.
But for Elias, that's not what's happening.
No. For Elias, he's tracking everything. He's scanning the perimeter. He's subconsciously mapping the exits. He's clocking the guy in the hoodie who's walking just a little too fast.
He's maintaining what they call situational awareness, which is an incredibly high cognitive load. It's exhausting.
And then it happens a few aisles over. A teenage stock clerk, just a kid, bumps into a display. A big stack of soda crates tips over, and there's this huge CRA.
Okay. If that happens when you're in the store, what do you do?
I'd jump probably. I'd look over and then I'd, think, oops, clean up on aisle 4 and go back to my shopping.
Exactly. You have what's called a startle response, but then your cortex, the thinking part of your brain, kicks in almost instantly and says, it's just soda. No threat here.
But that is not what happened to Elias. For Elias, that sound wasn't crates. It was a detonation. And this is the terrifying part. Before he could even think the word soda, before his brain could process supermarket, he had moved.
He didn't think, he just acted.
He covered the distance between the aisles in a full sprint and pinned the stock clerk, the poor kid who knocked them over against the shelving unit.
Physical, aggressive contact.
Violent contact. The description says his teeth were bared, his pupils were blown wide open, his heart was hammering with a ferocity that's meant for, a life or death struggle with a predator. He was ready to kill or be killed in that instant.
And the kid.
Obviously. And then, silence. The adrenaline starts to fade. And Elias is just standing there, shaking, holding this terrified teenager by the collar while 20 shoppers are just staring at him like he's a monster.
In that moment right there, that image of Elias shaking in the aisle.
Yeah.
It's the tragedy. That's the whole story in one snapshot.
Because what does the world see?
The world sees a violent, crazy guy.
Yeah.
They see a threat, a danger. But an evolutionary psychologist, they see something completely different.
They see the mismatch.
They see a magnificent, high-speed, perfectly calibrated survival machine that just fired a missile at a ghost. And that is the mismatch hypothesis.
Mismatch just feels like such a gentle word for, assaulting a teenager in a supermarket. It sounds like wearing navy socks with black shoes.
Right, it sounds so mild, doesn't it? But in evolutionary biology, a mismatch is a catastrophe. It can be lethal. It means your adaptations, the very tools your body and brain built over millennia to keep you alive, are now the very things that are destroying your life.
So when we look at the research, the argument is that Elias isn't broken.
And this is the really controversial part. The standard medical model says Elias has a disorder, PTSD. Disorder implies a broken part, a malfunction.
Something needs to be fixed.
Right. But this other perspective says, no, look at the speed, look at the strength, look at that reaction time. That is not a malfunction. That is high-performance engineering.
So if he were back in a collapsing building, or if we go way back, if he were on the Pleistocene plains facing down a saber-toothed tiger?
That reaction saves his life, 100%. If that loud noise had been a bomb, Elias is the one who survives, and the people just staring at him, they die. The only reason we call it a disorder is because of the context.
We took a soldier from the savannah and dropped him into a Whole Foods.
It's like bringing a tank to a traffic jam. The tank works perfectly, the cannon fires, the treads roll, but it crushes the Honda Civic in front of it.
And the driver of the tank goes to jail.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to get a bit more technical for a second, because he reacted fast, as that's easy to grasp. But what's actually happening in his wiring, you mentioned the defense cascade earlier.
Right, yeah, this is so crucial to understanding why he couldn't stop himself. It's not a choice. Evolution has basically given us a sequence of defenses. It's an algorithm that runs automatically.
So walk me through the steps of this algorithm.
Okay. Step 1 is avoidance. It's the simplest one. Stay away from the tiger's den. You don't go into places you know are dangerous.
But Elias was already failing this one, wasn't he? He was in a crowded, noisy, unpredictable place.
Right. So his baseline stress was already up. He was already on alert. Step 2 is attentive immobility. This is the freeze.
The deer in headlights thing.
Right. Deer in headlights usually implies panic. Attentive immobility is more of a stop, look, and listen phase. Strategic. Your heart rate actually drops for a moment. It's a phenomenon called fear bradycardia, so you can hear better. You become a statue to gather data.
You're trying to figure out, is that a twig snapping or is that a footstep?
Exactly. So normally you hear the crash, you freeze, you assess, your brain goes, oh, it's just soda. Problem solved.
And then you move on.
Then you move on. If the assessment says danger, you go to step 3, which is withdrawal, you run away. And then finally, if you're cornered, if you can't run, you hit step 4, aggressive defense, the fight. So
Elias, he just skipped steps 2 and 3 entirely.
He bypassed the whole assessment stage. He went from 0 to step 4 in a millisecond. In the literature, they call this the circus strike phase. He went straight to the attack.
But why? I mean, why would the brain skip the assessment? Isn't it smarter to check if it's a tiger first before you, start fighting?
Smarter? Maybe. Safer.
Backwards.
Okay, imagine you're one of our ancestors on the plains of Africa. You hear a roar in the bush 10 feet away. If you take 3 seconds to assess whether that's a lion or just the wind, and it is a lion, you're dead.
There's no time.
There's no time. Evolution does not care about accuracy. It doesn't care about social niceties. It cares about survival.
So it's speed over precision every single time.
Always. This brings us to a really useful concept called the smoke detector principle. Just think about the smoke detector in your hallway at home.
The one that goes off every single time I try to sear a steak. It drives me crazy.
Exactly. It's annoying, isn't it? It's a false positive. Yes. Would you ever buy a smoke detector that was like more chill? One that said, hey, there's a lot of smoke here, but let's just wait and see if there are actual flames before we start beeping?
Yeah, because if it's wrong just one time, my house burns down.
Precisely. The brain operates on that exact same better safe than sorry principle. It is far less costly from a biological standpoint to panic at a falling stack of crates 100 times than it is to miss one actual explosion.
So Elias's brain did a math problem in an instant.
A very, very fast one. It calculated. The cost of looking like a jerk is low. The cost of dying is infinitely high. Therefore, assumed death is imminent.
And it prioritized his physical survival over his social standing.
Which makes perfect sense if you genuinely believe you're in danger. And this gets us back to the weed of anger idea from the intro. Why anger? Why that specific response? Why didn't he just duck and cover?
If he had just curled up in a ball on the floor, people would have rushed over to help him. They would have pitied him. Oh, that poor guy's having a flashback. But he attacked. He pinned the kid. That's what made him a pariah.
This is where the mismatch becomes so tragic. We tend to think of fear and anger as opposites. You know, fear is retreating, anger is advancing. But in the context of trauma, anger is fear.
It's fear wearing mask.
It's fear with a sword drawn. There's this concept of the possession of safety.
Possession of safety. That.
Think about it in terms of resources. In the wild, if another animal tries to steal your food or your mate or your shelter, what do?
You fight them off. You get aggressive. You defend your territory.
You reassert control. You protect your resources. Now, for Elias, the resource that was just poached wasn't a piece of meat. It was his feeling of safety. It was his control over his environment.
So when the crates fell,
that signaled a breach in the perimeter. Control has been lost. The environment is now unpredictable and therefore unsafe. His brain interpreted that loss of control as a theft. Someone or something was stealing his safety, so he deployed aggression to snatch it back.
So he wasn't really attacking the boy. He was attacking the chaos.
He was trying to wrestle the environment back into a state of order that he could understand and survive. He was grabbing the steering wheel of a car that was skidding out of control.
But the problem is he shattered the social contract. I mean, the entire supermarket system relies on this shared delusion that we're all safe and polite and nothing bad will happen.
And Elias just ripped that curtain down.
Yeah.
He reminded everyone in that aisle that violence is possible, that the world isn't safe. And people hate that. We don't just fear the violence. We fear the reminder of violence.
And so we shun him. We isolate him. Which brings me to the next layer of this whole thing, because Elias's reaction was a split-second event. But what happens when that aggressive defense mode isn't just a reaction? What happens when it becomes a permanent personality trait?
When it stops being a tactic and starts being a long-term strategy.
Exactly. I want to talk about Sarah, because her story is less about a single explosion and more about, well, about friction, just this constant grinding, day-to-day friction.
The slow burn, yeah.
Right. So Sarah is a young woman living in Chicago in a pretty high-crime neighborhood, and a while back, she was the victim of a really brutal mugging, a genuinely traumatic event.
What we would call, in evolutionary terms, a direct fitness-reducing event.
Fitness-reducing. That sounds so clinical for something as horrible as getting beaten up.
No, but it's a specific term. It means an event that directly lowered her chances of survival or future reproduction. It was a direct hit to her biological bottom line.
So after something like that, you'd expect her to be timid, right? Maybe afraid to go outside.
The shaking victim.
But she went the complete opposite way. Her friends said her personality shifted into what they called constant combat mode. She became sharp-tongued, volatile. She'll scream at a delivery driver if the food is 5 minutes late. She'll snap at a stranger on the bus for just looking at her the wrong way.
The armor of irritability.
And her family is just at their wits' end. They see this as a major character flaw. They say she's burning bridges with everyone she knows. But when I was looking at the research on costly signaling theory, it clicked for me that Sarah isn't just being a jerk. She's broadcasting something very, very specific.
And this is a really hard concept for people to get their heads around because her behavior is so unpleasant. But Sarah is broadcasting a signal to the entire world, and that signal is, I am not a victim, and I am too expensive to exploit.
Too expensive to exploit. What exactly is costly signaling theory?
It's a concept that comes from biology. The classic example is a peacock.
The bird.
The bird.
Yeah.
Think about the male peacock's tail. If it's incredibly colorful, it's also really heavy. It makes it hard for him to fly. It makes him super easy for tigers and other predators to spot.
It's a terrible survival tool, objectively speaking.
It's an absolute nightmare. It's a handicap. It's costly. But that's the entire point. The very fact that he is still alive, despite having this giant, glowing, eat me sign on his back, proves to the female peacocks that he must have incredible genes. He's sending a signal that says, I am so strong, so fast, so clever that I can survive even with this ridiculous handicap.
It's flex.
It's the ultimate flex, and it's what's known as an honest signal. A weak peacock couldn't afford it. If a weak one tried to grow a tail that big, a tiger would eat him in a day. Only the strongest can afford to pay the cost.
Okay, I see the peacock logic, but how does screaming at a delivery driver connect to that? Where's the cost?
It's about building a reputation. The idea is that aggression and irritability can serve as a deterrent. By acting completely unhinged over a late pizza, Sarah is building a reputation for volatility.
She's showing everyone that she has a hair trigger.
Now, imagine you're a predator, a mugger on the street. You're looking for a victim. Who do you pick? The quiet person looking down at their phone. Or the woman who is screaming obscenities at a bus driver because he closed the doors too fast.
You avoid the screamer? Way too much trouble. Not worth the risk.
Not worth the risk. Her behavior is a signal that says, I am irrational. I am volatile. If you try to take my wallet, I will not make a rational calculation to hand it over. I will claw your eyes out. I will scream until my lungs give out.
She's signaling that the cost of attacking her is going to be way higher than the benefit of whatever is in her purse.
Go. It's pure game theory. She's dramatically raising the entry fee for engaging with her in any negative way.
But what about the costly part of costly signaling? For the peacock, it's the energy to grow the tail and the risk of being eaten. What's the cost for Sarah?
Her social life, her friends, her family.
Isolation.
That is the price she pays. And that's what makes the signal honest. If the signal were free, if you could just wear a t-shirt that says, warning, I'm tough, everyone would wear it. Predators would just ignore it. The signal has to be costly to be believable. Sarah is essentially burning down her own social village to make sure no one from the outside will ever attack her again.
That's just a heartbreaking piece of logic. I will be lonely, but I will be safe.
And the most tragic part is she probably doesn't even know she's doing it. It's not a conscious, deliberate decision. It's a biological imperative that has taken over. Her brain has run the numbers and decided that intimacy is a luxury good, but safety is an absolute necessity, and it has traded one for the other.
It forces you to look at unlikability in a totally different way. We usually think people who are mean or irritable are just bad people, but you're saying that in this context, the meanness is a wall built from rubble.
It's a protective wall. Absolutely. Think about something called coalitionary psychology. Humans are tribal animals. We evolved to survive conflict in groups, in coalitions. When a war ends or when a mugging ends, the event itself is over. But the psychology that prepared you for that conflict, that doesn't just switch off like a light.
So Sarah is, in her mind, still at war.
She is operating on wartime software in a peacetime environment. In a coalitionary conflict, you need to be tough. You need to show that you can and will fight. Being nice and agreeable in a war zone gets you killed. Sarah's still living in that war zone, mentally.
This has to create a vicious cycle, though, doesn't it? The research we looked at mentions social pathology.
Yes, and this is where the adaptation becomes a trap. The behavior works perfectly to keep strangers away, which is the original goal, but it also keeps help away. It keeps loved ones away.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%. Sarah screams at someone, that person reacts with hostility, or they just get scared and leave, and Sarah's brain goes, see, I told you. People are hostile. The world is dangerous. They'll always abandon you. Good thing I had my guard up.
So the aggression actually proves itself right.
It constantly confirms her internal model of the world as a hostile place. And because she becomes more isolated, she feels more vulnerable. And because she feels more vulnerable, she amps up the aggression even more. It's a feedback loop from hell.
And it works too well. That's a detail that really haunted me from the reading. That anger alters other people's behavior faster than almost anything else.
If you want to change the entire atmosphere in a room, instantly, you don't use logic, you don't use pleading, you use rage. Rage clears the room. It creates space.
Yeah.
And for someone who feels constantly suffocated by threat, rage is the most efficient tool they have.
So she's gambling her long-term happiness to secure her immediate safety.
And that is a gamble evolution is always willing to make. Evolution couldn't care less if you're happy. It only cares if you're alive.
Well, speaking of the cost of staying alive, we've talked about the social cost with Sarah, but there's a huge physical bill that comes due for all this too. You just can't run an engine in the red zone forever without blowing a gasket.
Biology always keeps a ledger, and eventually the debt gets collected.
And this brings us to David. Now, David's story struck me because on the surface, he looks like a total winner. He's not a rescue worker. He's not living in a high-crime area. He's a high-functioning executive, big corner office, big salary.
The modern alpha male.
Exactly. But his background explains the engine under the hood. He grew up with chronic instability, a lot of neglect, a really tough, chaotic childhood.
Which sets the baseline for his entire system. His internal thermostat was set to high from a very, very young age.
Right. So David's strategy wasn't a physical explosion like Elias, and it wasn't a social explosion like Sarah. His strategy was to channel that hypervigilance into the boardroom. He used his trauma response to outwork everyone.
He weaponized his anxiety.
He was the guy who could spot problems a mile away. He was aggressive with competitors, a scorched earth approach to business. And for 20 years it worked. He got the promotions, he made the money, he won.
Short-term success. Evolution loves short-term success.
But then at age 45, the bill came due. And it was a big one. His body just collapsed. We're talking chronic inflammation, early-stage heart disease, and this crushing, profound fatigue. He said he physically couldn't get out of bed anymore.
This is the story of allostatic load.
Allostatic load, it sounds like something a structural engineer would talk about, like the stress on a bridge.
It is the wear and tear on the bridge, but in this case, the bridge is your body. To really understand, David, we have to talk about the body budget.
The body budget. This is a really interesting concept.
Fantastic. Think of your body like a company with a bank account. You have a finite amount of resources, energy, and your brain, as the CEO, has to decide where to spend that energy.
Okay. What are the main departments in this company?
You've really got two main departments. Department A is growth and repair. This is your long-term investment division. It handles digestion, fighting off viruses, rebuilding cells, keeping your immune system strong.
A maintenance crew.
Right. Department B is defense. This is your security team. This is the fight-or-flight system, the HPA axis.
So the security guards.
Exactly. Now, in a healthy person, you spend most of your budget on maintenance and repair. You only pay the security guards when there's an actual break-in. But David, because of his chaotic childhood and because of his scorched earth career, his brain allocated all of his resources, all of his budget, to defense.
So for 45 years, he was hiring more guards, buying bigger guns, installing thicker locks, and he never bothered to fix the leaky roof.
He never fixed the roof. He never unclogged the plumbing. He never restocked the pantry. All the energy went to funding the HPA axis.
Let's get specific on the HPA axis. We hear that acronym thrown around a lot. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. What is it actually doing in the body?
Think of it as the command chain for your stress response. The hypothalamus is the watchtower in your brain. It spots a potential threat. It sends a signal to the pituitary gland. That's the general manager. The manager then yells at the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, those of the soldiers, to mobilize.
And the soldiers release the chemicals of war.
Cortisol and adrenaline. And these chemicals are incredible in the short term. They dump sugar into your bloodstream for instant energy. They tighten your muscles, ready for action. They sharpen your vision. And they shut down non-essential systems like digestion, because you don't need to be digesting a sandwich while you're fighting off a bear.
It's like a biological supercharge.
And for David, this constant supercharge made him a great executive. He was sharper, faster, more intense than everyone else in the room. But cortisol is corrosive over the long term. It's like pouring acid through your pipes to make the water flow faster. Do it once in an emergency, fine. Do it every single day for 40 years.
The pipes are going to burst.
The pipes burst. That's allostatic load. It's the cumulative biological damage of being in a chronic state of mobilization. David made a trade-off. He traded his long-term health for immediate security and status.
It's an adaptive trade-off?
Evolution is nothing but trade-offs. If your brain thinks you might die tomorrow, or lose your job, or your status tomorrow, you don't save for retirement. You spend everything you have right now to survive the day. David's body was operating on a live fast, die young protocol. even though he was sitting in a comfortable air-conditioned office.
But this is the part that I still struggle with. He made it. He was successful. He was rich. By all modern standards, he was safe. Why couldn't he stop? Why couldn't he just tell his HPA axis, okay, guys, we can stand down now. We won.
Because these systems are automatic. They're not under conscious control. Fear and rage systems are specifically designed to override rational thought. They are, you could say, suboptimal in the modern world because evolution prioritized turning the alarm on as quickly as possible. It invested far, far less in the mechanisms to turn the alarm off.
It's easier to start a fire than it is to put one out.
And there's another layer to this, a concept called exemplar construction.
Oh, this is the brain as a prediction machine idea. This part blew my mind.
Fascinating. Your brain isn't just passively seeing the world as it is. It's a prediction engine. It's constantly guessing what's going to happen next so it can budget your energy efficiently.
It's always trying to stay one step ahead of the curve.
Right. So David's brain learned from his childhood to always predict threat. It built an internal model of the world where danger is the default state. Therefore, his brain was budgeting for high cortisol and a high heart rate before any threat even appeared.
So even if he's just walking into a friendly lunch meeting,
his brain is saying, budget for a tiger attack, prepare the cortisol, mobilize the troops.
And what happens at the lunch meeting is totally boring and safe.
His brain just constructs the threat out of neutral data. A long pause in the conversation, that's a threat. An ambiguous phrase in an email, that's a threat. A waiter dropping a fork, that's a threat. Over time, fear became the only concept his brain used to interpret any high-intensity situation. This is hyperarousal. It isn't a mistake. It's a correction his brain is making for a world it predicts is dangerous.
He was hallucinating dragons because he had spent his whole life buying swords.
That's a very poetic way to put it. Yes. And that crushing fatigue, the exhaustion that finally took him down.
That was the bankruptcy.
That was his body going into chapter 11. The body budget was completely depleted. And that level of fatigue isn't just being tired. It's a biological stop-loss order. The brainstem basically says we have no more energy. If we keep running the HPA axis at this level, the heart's going to stop. So I am shutting down the host system to prevent catastrophic failure.
It completely reframes the idea of burnout. We usually think of burnout as, oh, I work too hard. But this suggests it's a physiological bankruptcy caused by a lifetime of defensive spending.
And it connects right back to Elias and Sarah. They are all paying a massive physiological price. That weed of anger requires huge amounts of metabolic energy to maintain. It's a form of internal theft. Being angry is expensive.
So, okay, we've got the evolutionary mismatch with Elias, we've got the costly signaling with Sarah, and we've got the physiological bankruptcy with David. I want to try and synthesize all of this. We started this whole conversation with that neighbor's comment. He needs to stop dwelling on the past and just move on.
A move-on mandate.
Right. Based on everything we've just discussed, why is moving on so biologically impossible, or at least incredibly difficult for people like them? Why is the brain so stubborn about holding on to this stuff?
This gets us to the mechanics of what we could call the locked-in brain. Why do these patterns get so stuck? One of the biggest reasons is what the research calls conservative memory.
Conservative in the sense that it resists change.
Precisely. Fear conditioning is inherently conservative. We're evolutionarily pre-prepared to learn certain fears. We learn to fear snakes or heights or strangers almost instantly.
It takes one bad experience with a dog to create a lifelong fear of dogs.
Exactly, one bad experience. But unlearning that fear, that is a slow, difficult, biologically frustrating process.
Why the asymmetry? Why is it so easy to learn fear and so hard to unlearn it?
Again, it comes down to the cost of being wrong. If you forget where the best berry patch is, you go hungry for an afternoon. If you forget where the lion lives, you get eaten.
So the brain hoards trauma.
It hoards it like it's gold. The brain is biased to promote the maintenance and the overgeneralization of fear, not the forgetting of it. It would much rather you be anxious and alive than relaxed and dead.
So when we tell someone to just let it go, we're not just being insensitive. We're asking them to fight against millions of years of evolutionary programming.
We are asking them to voluntarily dismantle their own survival system. And then you have the exemplar construction loop that we touched on with David, this vicious circular logic.
Okay, remind me of the loop.
The brain predicts a threat. Let's go back to Elias. He predicts the falling crates are a bomb. He acts on that prediction and attacks the clerk.
And he survives. The bomb doesn't go off.
Now, a healthy brain might look at that situation and update its software and might say, oops, no bomb. My prediction was wrong. I overreacted. Next time, I should relax.
But a traumatized brain doesn't do that.
A traumatized brain reinterprets the outcome. It says, I survived because I was ready. I survived because I pinned that clerk. If I hadn't been so aggressive, I might have died.
Wow. So the fact that he was safe doesn't disprove the fear. His own aggression takes credit for the safety.
It takes full credit. It's what's known as a prediction error failure. The lack of disaster is seen as proof that the defense mechanism worked. So the behavior is reinforced. I yelled at the delivery driver, and I didn't get mugged today. Therefore, yelling at people is what keeps me safe.
That's an incredibly difficult loop to break out of. Because you can't prove a negative. You can never prove to them that they wouldn't have been hurt if they had just been nice.
Never. And then you throw the final ingredient into this toxic stew. The social environment. The microculture.
This is about how the world actually reacts to them.
Yes. If Sarah acts aggressively all the time, how do people treat her? They treat her poorly. They avoid her. They look at her with hostility.
Which confirms her internal model that the world is a battlefield full of enemies.
It proves her right every single day. If you treat the world like a war zone, the world will usually fire back. And this creates what the sources call enduring phobias rather than transient phobias. If you constantly withdraw or attack, you prevent yourself from ever having the mastery experiences you need to heal.
You never stay in the room long enough to see the peace.
You never stay in the room long enough to see the peace. You slam the glass on the table and you leave. You scream and you hang up the phone, you attack and you run. So you never, ever get the new data point that says, hey, it's okay. We're just having dinner. You're safe here.
And when the body budget is just totally depleted, like with David, you get dissociation. Is that the end game?
That's the last-ditch effort. When the brain can no longer even afford the energy to predict threats, it stops predicting entirely. The world starts to feel unreal, like you're in a movie. You feel like a robot. It's a desperate final attempt to save energy. It's the computer screen going black to save the last dregs of the battery.
It really is a tragedy of mechanics, then. We're looking at these high-performance machines that are functioning exactly as they were designed to, but they're running in a world that no longer exists.
The way. Elias, Sarah, David, they are not broken. Their software was written in blood to survive a much, much harsher reality. We judge the weed of anger because it's ugly and it's prickly. We want to see pretty flowers. But we fail to respect that the weed is the only thing strong enough to grow in this scorched earth they're living on.
We demand that they change their software to fit our polite society. We tell them, be nicer, be calmer, move on. But maybe the problem isn't that they're dwelling on the past. Maybe the problem is that their bodies are the only ones being honest enough to admit that for them, the war never actually ended.